Oh, Mr. McCluskey, the gymnasium business. Tell everyone a bit about the business and then tell them where the challenge lies right now.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. We're a gym in Brisbane, Australia. So long story short, I spent probably 13 years building up a bunch of gyms. We had 12 gyms in Australia. We opened one in India, made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of lessons, and essentially had to start again in 2020 after COVID. And so along with having a couple of kids in that time, I've just been basically, trying to figure out my long term, what am I doing?
Okay.
So we've built the one gym up, so it's doing pretty good now. And then it's just kind of like, what next?
Okay. So so the first answer to any question that I have of what next is, well, what's the goal? What is the goal for the McCluskey family? Is it to work 10 hours a week and be relaxed and have $250,000 a year income? Or is it to build a level of wealth that what is the goal? Yeah. It's the old Mad Hatter thing. Unless we know where you want to go, it doesn't matter which way, which thing we do. So what's your goal, buddy, right now? Or are you unclear on that?
No, I think in the last couple of weeks since posting it, I've been doing a lot of thinking and journaling, and I went away for a couple of days and did a lot of work on it. I'm actually really clear on that now. So I've always wanted to do something big and have a big impact, I guess. And I see now an avenue for that in the fitness industry where we can basically bring a much higher level of quality to what is currently in the marketplace with a lot of kind of mediocre franchise systems that are out there.
So in your mind then, what's the goal now?
So 30 years, 500 gyms, 2 million average minimum per gym.
Great. And those 500 gyms would be in how many countries? How many countries would you look at?
That's a good question. I haven't got to that detail yet.
Okay.
No.
So let's go backwards a step, right? I love that size of goal. I love that size of goal because in goal setting, there's negative goals, which is to get out of debt or to lose weight or to not be broke or not work too many hours. There's positive goals to be fit enough to run this far, or to have this to only work 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, or there's the positive goals. And then ultimately there's a legacy level of goal. And what you're setting there is not a leave a legacy goal, it's a live a legacy goal. Paul Dunn was on my podcast, and he talks about living your legacy, not leaving a legacy. And that's really what you're doing there. So when you think about that, the level of passion that can come from that and the number of people you need to find to join your team, you're going to need to step into that leadership role in a massive way. So now, are you looking to do that through, I imagine you're now exploring, do I do that through franchising? Do I do it through raising capital and doing it myself? Which methodology will I use? Let me ask you a question. What's the cost to open a gym in your model? What is the approximate amount needed?
150 to 250, depending on how much we want to pimp it out, basically.
Great. And how much of that can be funded through financing of the equipment?
I'd say a good portion of it, certainly well over half, or at least half of it.
Okay. Yeah. So when we think about opening it, you need about 100 grand and the rest will come through. When you open the gym today, if you were to open a brand new gym today, how many months beforehand would you start marketing?
6 to 8 weeks.
Okay. And that gets you with what level of revenue before you actually open?
Before we open, say 20 clients a week for 6 weeks, 120 times 75, about 10 grand a week.
Okay. Is that enough?
So we can kind of build it in stages. So a lot of our overhead is in wages. So we're a coaching gym. So, small group and group training. Everyone works with a coach, etc. So, a huge part of our expenses is wages. So we kind of incrementally add more coaches as we grow. So, yeah.
Okay. So that is at that 10 grand, it's breaking even or making a profit?
We'd be able to break even at that whilst trying to grow it fairly aggressively.
Okay, what would it take for you to open with 20 grand rather than 10?
20 grand a week. that would just mean double the signups, I guess.
Okay.
40 signups a
And
week.
what would that mean? Would that just mean doubling the amount of marketing, or would it mean starting earlier, or what would it mean?
Yeah, it would mean it wouldn't probably be starting earlier, because I think, not many people are signing up for a gym to start in 4 months' time, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's got to be pretty quick. So I think it'd just be a more aggressive approach. We can just increase the marketing spend. That's no problem. And having a second salesperson.
So when you think of it that way, you go straight into profitability on day one. Okay. And that's really what you want to look at. So if you write me, so here's the thing, Jacob, I want to teach you about thinking big and scale in a business, right?
Yep.
Let's imagine I take two kids, right? One kid grew up in Silicon Valley, went to high school there, saw their friends and their dads and their moms all work at massive unicorn companies, Googles and Microsofts and all of these massive big things, Spotifys and Ubers and stuff like that. Then went to Stanford. Their professors also worked at, these other companies. And then I take a kid like you and me, grew up in Brisbane, Australia, and saw our parents work for normal companies, and went to Queensland University, or QUT, up over there in Brisbane. And hey, presto, we come out. I take those two kids, I give them 5 years work experience working in the types of companies that they're used to. And I asked them to write me a business plan. What size business plan is the kid from Brisbane going to write on average? And what size business plan is the kid from Silicon Valley going to write me on average? It takes as much work to write a $1 million business plan as it does to write a $1 billion business plan. It's the same amount of work. And so when you sit down and start thinking about your methodology, Jacob, and I'm not saying all of it should be on raised capital, but I would look at a hybrid in your case. I would franchise foreign markets, non-English speaking markets in particular, or markets with low GDP. Okay, so if it's a lower GDP, like if you're going to be opening the gyms across India, it's probably not worth the capital to go and do that because of the time investment that's needed. Whereas if you're opening gyms across Canada, UK, US, then that's going to be worth your time. Does that make sense, first and foremost?
Yeah, 100%, especially with my experience in India.
Yeah. So I look at, and there's a great book you want to read, Jacob, called, two great books. Number one, this one, mine. This is Scaling a Business, right? Pulling profits out of a hat, okay? Again, on Amazon. Actually, Sarah, can you just put everyone's in different countries, so it doesn't matter which Amazon, you all got to go to your own. And then the second one is called How Big Things Get Done. The author's name is Bent Flyberg, FLYV something or other. So here's what ultimately will happen, Jacob. I want you to write a $1 billion business plan. Right now, I teach this once a year. I have people come to Vegas. I select 10 companies that I think can go to $1 billion, and I bring them in and I spend 5 days with them, helping them create a $1 billion business plan. In most cases, we end up with much more. But a $1 billion business plan is simply X times Y, Jacob. Now, let me explain X times Y. You've talked about each of your gyms doing $2 million a year, right?
Yep.
So $2 million a year gym, you need 500, as you said, to do $1 billion a year.
Yep. Not
complex. Now, in your case, I would look at how do we break it down? How many of them will be corporately owned? How many of them will be in franchised situation? All that sort of stuff. Now, that's going to take some learning for you, right? Remember this when you're writing a business plan. The first 12 months of your business plan should be learning. Study this. People don't give anywhere near enough time to learn in the business. A good friend of mine, Jeffrey Gitomer, he's written all the books on sales in particular. And Jeffrey, we were chatting we were both appearing on the Business Excellence podcast in the UK. And we were asked a question about the good to great stuff. And Jeffrey said, the problem with the book Good to Great, most people are shit. They're not at good yet. They should start with shit to okay. Then there should be a book called Okay to Good. And then there's a book called Good to Great. And then they need a fourth book called Great to Amazing, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Right. So you've got to do, and this is where, actually back to my podcast. How many of you are on the Big Success podcast? Wave at me if you're listening to my podcast. If you're not, get on bradsugars.com, click the podcast link. It takes you to where all the podcasts are, okay? Or you can watch it on YouTube. One of the interesting things that Professor Alan Pease said, he said, the biggest problem with goals is there's one thing that kills most people's goals, and it's a very simple thing. He said, it's the word how. Like, Jacob, if you went to the average person and said, I'm going to build $1 billion gym empire in the next 7 years, like by 2030, let's just say that's your goal, 6 years, whatever the number is, 10 years, it doesn't matter. Average person that you would tell that to would say to you, I don't think you can do that. Well, how are you going to do it? How are you going to do that? How will you do that? And the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you don't know right now. If you did know, it wouldn't be a goal. If you did know how to do it, you would have already done it, type thing. The goal, the enemy of goals, is how. Because our first thing, and this goes back to any of you that have ever studied 30X Life with me, if you go back to 30X Life, which, by the way, gang, did we put the links in for 30X, the 3 30Xs, or we put 90X in? Did we? Please just put them all in. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Gunnar. But if you go into that formula, Jacob, of dream, goal, learn, plan, act, so now we've started with the business dream, not life dream, but business dream. That's called a vision for a business. Now, you'll have to turn that more into a vision, by the way, not just a set of numbers, 500 times 2 million. That's not really a vision. The vision, like if you look at, if you jump on actioncoach.com, you'll see my vision of world abundance through business re-education. That's not just, okay, let's create a $3 billion a year company. Yes, we're creating a $3 billion a year company, but we're doing that by creating world abundance through business re-education. That's a lot more inspiring and enrolling, which is a big part of leadership and the vision.
Yep.
So if you sit back and say to yourself, okay, I've got the dream, now I need to turn it into goals. And the goals then determine what do you need to learn. So what do I need to learn? I got to study franchising. Now, you don't need to be an expert at it, Jacob, but you need to know enough so that when you're interviewing someone, you can employ the right person, type thing. You need to know enough to ask the right questions, I guess, is probably the simplest thing of being great at knowledge base. You need to understand GDP and how do we break down GDP to determine what's the price of a franchise in Pakistan or Vietnam, type thing. What are the franchising laws in those different markets and all of those things. But come to the trip, come over and do for any of you that haven't worked out our university and that 5-day course. When you do, how many days is that all up? Sarah, is it like 15 days with me for the year? It's like 60 grand. So 15 days with me, 10 of them are virtual days online where we do purpose training, entrepreneur buying and selling companies, real estate training, which for the gyms, Jacob, one of the big goals you should have is owning the buildings they're all in. So your franchisees buy you a building, basically. So all of the, so there's 5 virtual trainings plus the 5-day in Vegas. It's a 60 grand if any of you want any info on that. What's 60 grand among friends, Joe? Jeez, but this is the thing, Joe, and in answer to your question very seriously, we do so much for free for everyone. If anyone's followed me for more than a month or two, you know how much free stuff I put out there into the marketplace. I just give everything away. You don't pay me for the knowledge, you pay me for my time. So that's like someone said to me, I did a speech in Saudi Arabia the other day, and they said, dang, you must have charged a lot to go there. I said, I didn't charge anything for the speech. I charged for sitting on an airplane there and back and not being with my family for 2 days. That's what they pay me for, not to go and actually do the speech.